How can you build a multi-million-dollar brand with just a camera and consistency? Meet Adam Robinson, the founder who turned a few simple videos into a $22 million empire.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and coming on the Hey, Nice SaaS podcast. Super excited about this one. I will say, of all the guests, I've done probably the most prep, partly because I've been very interested in the content you've created. So kind of with that lead in, for anyone who maybe doesn't have a LinkedIn account, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on.
Sure. So my name is Adam Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of two different SaaS companies. One's called retention.com and one's called RB2B. Retention.com, we sell to e-com stores. It does person-level website visitor identity and powers a bunch of workflows like cart abandonment and stuff like that. RB2B, same deal, person-level website visitor identity. We sell to B2B. And it's a freemium model. You can just sign up for free, put a pixel on your site, and we'll start pumping in profiles to a Slack channel, and you can check it out and experience the euphoric voyeurism of seeing who's on your site.
I love it. It's interesting. You as kind of, I think this kind of being paired up with the timing. You were just on a little hiatus, right? Congratulations, by the way.
3 weeks off.
New child,
a second kid. Yeah.
So I referred to you the other day as the father of LinkedIn. You've amassed quite a following there, and I think it's in large part due to the content that you create, and I definitely want to get into that in a minute. But I think it's fun, the irony that a platform, unless you have a premium account, whoever visits your profile is it's anonymous. You're not sure who came to visit your profile, but here you are creating, in large part, a free tool for people to kind of capture website visitors, and then really, I think that's a fun little play, but obviously you didn't get there overnight. It didn't happen by accident. Give us the what's the lead in to how you got to creating this product?
So like the medium length story was the first SaaS company that I started was in 2014. It was an email newsletter app like MailChimp, which is the one everyone's heard of. It was just like 1,000th of the size. And we were able to get it to 3 million ARR, and then we got stuck. And, stuck for 3 years. It just, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this boat. It's like profitable, not really growing. Nothing I did worked. I was going to conferences to try to figure out what to do, webinars, hiring coaches, just trying to figure out whatever the heck I could do to get it to grow again. And then I kind of found this woman who's now my co-founder, who thought there was an opportunity to go after the market above MailChimp, but below Salesforce Marketing Cloud, because she has just come from a company that was doing that, but she thought they were going up and they were leaving this slice exposed or whatever. So spent a year building that product, went to a trade show to launch it, did this big stunt. No one cared. Eyes glazed over. But I had heard that it was possible from a technological standpoint to resolve an anonymous website visitor to an email address. I'd never heard of such a thing, but I heard it was possible. And the second day of the trade show, I was walking around to people, and as their eyes glazed over, literally it was like rock bottom moment the first night. I was just like, oh my God, I just wasted another year of my life and $1 million building this thing that no one wants at all. So I was walking around talking to people about the email marketing app. Their eyes glazed over. I already have one. There was 10 other people going after it. And then I'd be like, by the way, what if I could get you email addresses from people that didn't fill out a form? Every one of them was 1,000% yes. Where do I buy that? How do I get that? How is that even possible? How is that legal? All that. So the signal was so strong that I went on this, down this rabbit hole trying to figure out how to do it. Took, 6 months or something to figure out actually how to do it. And then it started as a feature in the email app, and people were signing up for the email app using the feature and not using the rest of the app, downloading the file, putting it in their email app and saying it was awesome. So that's a pretty good indicator of initial product market fit. So spun it out, connected it to a bunch of stuff. And then that was the start of That's probably almost 5 years ago. And it's been a bumpy journey. That business is now 22 million ARR with 30 people, which is pretty good. Highly, highly profitable. And kind of along the way, about a year ago, I hired the COO to help us grow the company. We got it to 12 million ARR with 6 people. And then I thought it was a unicorn at that point, but I didn't know how to build a company. So I brought this guy, Santosh, in. He's a B2B data guy. And the whole time he's like, we got to sell this to B2B. If it works for $100 sneaker, it's going to work for a $50,000 piece of software. But it wasn't the time. And then a year ago, before I even was yes to the product idea, I'd been posting a lot on LinkedIn to try to grow a personal brand to create awareness for the e-com product, which was so-so. I was like, I'm going to see if I can write content that would aggregate audience for a B2B tool. And literally from the first post, it was it got I posted about BDR and how it was broken and how we let go of our whole BDR team, and our company started ripping, and it got instead of 30 likes, it got 3,000, right? It was just crazy. And then I write 3 posts at a time, and I sat down, I wrote these 3 other posts. And I remember I was in Santa Fe last year over Labor Day with a couple friends. We had an 8:00 dinner. I sat down at 6:30, wrote the post at that dinner because I've been obsessed with this idea that I'd just gone viral for the first time. I was like, man, I think I just wrote some bangers. One of my struggles up to this point was I don't really know what good is. It's you're making content, nothing's really. It's oh yeah, 12 likes, great. Is that good or bad? Is 2,000 views good? I don't know. But 3,000 likes is pretty good on LinkedIn. So I was like, man, I just wrote 3 posts. If these are bangers, then I know what good is. If these are not, then I still am lost like I was a year ago, and they all just absolutely crushed. So I was like, okay, I know how to do this. I can write these posts forever. We can definitely build a huge audience of B2B people. Let's build a B2B product. So that it then over the next 5 months, just rush the content, basically used my profile to book 300 discovery calls with me and Santosh. And then we launched the product in March of 2020. If you go to rb2b.bearmetrics.com, you can see our public revenue dashboard. We're 3.5 run rate ARR, which is decent because I don't even consider the product usable for our ICP yet, with some revelations I've had over my paternity leave. And yeah, I think that we're barely scratching the surface. There's so much left to do. Yeah, I'm just amazed at the power of the founder brand. I think there's most of our users are free, and there's this large affinity for the brand and the content and everything else. And the product's great at the free level. It's at the paid level, it's not great, but for the use case of just show me 5 or 10 people every day who are on my website and their headshots and everything, it's amazing for free. I think there's an opportunity to sell those people kind of Horses community one-to-many coaching and bundle the paid software so they get the features also in with the year subscription to the rest of that stuff, which I'm excited about. And then I think for growth stage SaaS, where we screwed up because everyone before us has sold products kind of like this way. It's funny you wrote inbound let outbound on that board. I actually think that I've been thinking about this whole thing wrong. Inbound let outbound, the idea is you create signals with marketing, and then you take these leads, that you get from de-anonymization, and you use those to prospect cold people and bring them back or whatever. I actually don't think that that's the best use of this, because I don't think that they're leads. I think this is a signal. And the more valuable thing is, if you're engaged in an email thread with someone and they hit the site, or they're in your CRM and they hit their site, or basically one of those two things is a filter. And I don't think the delivery mechanism of Slack is good if you're over a certain size, because there's filtering challenges, there's routing challenges and all this stuff. So, and I think that inbound led outbound as the use case for this is wrong, because that implies that like it's replacing prospecting, when like I don't think that's the best use of the signal. I think it's actually to like get the signal, then be told exactly what to do with it by AI, then nudge people down the funnel with it. And I think that's way more valuable than, here's a lead that showed up for the first time that you've never talked to before in your life. So like reach out. That's sort of valuable, but like much more valuable is like help me close deals faster,
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to like admit that I'm wrong and bow down very publicly at some point to like announce this new version of this product to Mark Cosglow and be like, you were right.
And then you're going to take massive VC funding, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to do that. That is for fucking sure. But one thing about this founder brand is like I put a post out, a very dramatic post about churn, which was like kind of overstated for these these nuanced reasons. Like we had an agency who had 80 accounts with us quit and roll them all into one, so it like spiked our churn like massively. But like I love this shit for LinkedIn because it's like anything, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like spiking, it's getting worse, like whatever. But like 250 people told us the exact reason they churned with like incredible detail, so like all of that information plus like our internal team like trying to really make the signal valuable and actionable. It just would have taken a quarter for any other company to get that amount of information. It's just it came in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I'm just the power of this ongoing conversation continues to be dumbfounding to me.
You're iterating in real time. It's a beautiful
totally.
thing. And then it goes to your point.
Wild.
You always speak about, building in public. And I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, there's a ton there. And I'll say this too, like in doing some research, and I was already, following your content, but I went down the Adam Robinson rabbit hole. I listened to every podcast you've been on. Not really, there's way too many. But I listened to a ton, and there were a couple of things that I hadn't come across yet that really stood out to me. And I definitely wanted to touch on them today. And like, you've kind of alluded to it a little bit. You've referred to, content market fit and kind of how like the catalyst to this LinkedIn growth, and then kind of what followed, and even in parallel was RB2B, kind of what you'd learned from retention and efforts prior to that. All that to say, there was something that stood out. You were doing an interview on another podcast, and you were talking basically about the content you're creating, and you just referenced it not getting as much engagement, but it didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel like it was sincere, because you referenced, I know there's like if there's someone who does have an e-com store and they're successful, like what makes my content better than theirs, mine more appealing than theirs, and you shifting over to it, you're in a great spot too, you being your own ICP in many ways. So kind of with that element of it, with, speaking about content market fit and speaking about, as much of a buzzword as it may be, but authenticity and the realness, if that's even a way to describe it, the sincerity of each piece of content. And yes, still playing the game of the hooks and things that are maybe polarizing on the surface, but there's still an essence of value within them. So I say that to kind of tee up, something that I kind of learned along this process is I've pivoted recently. I've been doing video marketing for a little over 4 years, but I'm serving a new audience. I kind of felt like I was serving the wrong audience before. I refer to it, I'm a visual person. So I'm like, I'm trying to serve deep dish pizza to a gluten-free crowd. It's just not quite working.
Yeah.
So, switching now, and I feel like a lot of the content I've been trying to create is speaking to the person I'm trying to serve almost as if I'm one of them, but I'm not. I come from a different perspective. I come from the video and production perspective. I'm not operating a multi-million-dollar ARR SaaS company. I've tinkered with some no-code tools. That's what got me interested in SaaS. But long, rambly way of saying, like, yeah, if you could just, what is the benefit, or what would you say is probably one of the most appealing aspects of that founder-led brand, and then finding content market fit as you've experienced it?
So like, okay, so I'm going to tackle that in stages. So like, number one, I have the best possible alignment for this, meaning I am my ICP. I'm actually the ideal future version of all of them. not to brag, but like for early stage founders, everybody wants to be a 25 million ARR bootstrap, super profitable and like posting about it, right? If you're a revenue leader, non-founder CEO of a 200 million ARR SaaS, you want to be the founder of a 25 million ARR bootstrap SaaS posting about it, right? Like, so that is an incredible position to be in because it gives every word that you say so much more value when you are who they want to be, right? So that's number one. Number two is they do their jobs on LinkedIn. They are the LinkedIn power users, right? These guys, it's like SaaS, salespeople, marketers, recruiters would be the other space that are LinkedIn power users. But like they're doing their job in Sales Navigator, they're doing their job on LinkedIn. They're constantly messaging people. If you're an early stage founder, like this is where you're hitting people up to try to like talk to them about your product or whatever. So, it has this incredible alignment for pipeline. And I think when people, believe it or not, I get hit up all the time. But it's like, hey, like I want to do this content thing like you're doing. Like, can I? What would you recommend that I do? Right. So like, I think having the goal of what I have gotten to is not really a good thing to try to hold yourself to when you start. A story. What got me started? The first thing that got me started on this path was 3 years ago. I was at a conference called War Room. It was like the digitalmarketer.com's highest point of it. It's a $40,000 mastermind, right? You go to like 3 or 4 events or whatever. Because I wanted to sell to these guys because I thought they were get email retention.com was the audience. So, like people had told me if you just stood up and said what you did, like you'd get millions of dollars business. So didn't actually happen, but it's a room of digital marketers, right? Like it's not B2B people. They're not on LinkedIn, but like they had this guy who was president of this company called Kajabi, which is a SaaS. It's like an edu platform that like had a $2 billion kind of like majority sale valuation exit. And like, the guy interviewing him was like, okay, if you were at 5 million in revenue today and you were giving one piece of advice to CEOs, what would it be? Guy says, I post on LinkedIn every day. I was like, that's fucking weird. Like, why? Seriously, like, why? Why would you say that to this audience? Like, why would he think that for his audience? Like those edutainment people or whatever it is, the info product space, they're not on LinkedIn, right? So like, why would he think that posting on LinkedIn is so valuable? So I pulled him aside and he's like, look, man, it comes down to this. You can watch Yellowstone. And even though John Dutton has not written his mission, vision, values on the wall, when you watch that show, you know what it's like to be a cowboy on John Dutton's ranch. He's like, if you post on LinkedIn as the CEO, every single part of your business, not necessarily the customer acquisition mechanism, but everything outside of it, right? Like what is a success to a big company? It's like product and people. I don't know. I don't think there's anything else, right? It's like the people are going to make the processes, like whatever. It's like, how good of talent can you aggregate around how good of a product do you have? And like to a large extent, they're correlated. Your product's going to get better with the higher level of talent you can attract. So his point is like, look, for recruiting alone, it's worth posting 3 times a week. If you can create every single person that even thinks about working at your company is going to look at the CEO's LinkedIn page. If you can create an inbound trust building mechanism and you get people raising their hand to work for you instead of the push where you're trying to sell people, right? That alone is worth an unbelievable amount. And by the way, that goes for investors, that goes for partnerships, that goes for kind of ecosystem level respect and awareness, agencies, like all sorts of stuff. So for him, it was just like letting the world know what you're about and why you're doing what you're doing. So if you don't have this alignment that I have, I would still advocate doing it. For one, for that reason. Two, I believe that the ability to create and or harness the power of organic social media and direct it towards your business is the most powerful force in the world today. And you can do anything you want with it. If you can create it yourself, you're in a position of even more strength, because if you have to rely on others to create it, there's a very delicate incentive alignment that has to occur to actually get a UGC motion working in any kind of real way. And we have one that works, and I can talk about it, but like, so why is that? So it's like, you should start posting for the first reason, but also you should start posting for the second reason, because it's like, and this is a Russell Brunson quote. It's like, you should start posting on social media every day today. You will get 0 likes, 0 comments, 0 whatever, but that's not the point. If you start today and you keep going, you are one day closer to finding your voice. And once you have found your voice, it may not be for this business, but you will be able to unlock a power that only people who have found their voices even understand, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't even contemplate how powerful it is in the doors that it opens for you until you have felt it, right? And even when it's not ripping like mine is, like if people just start, oftentimes like I'm like, dude, hire a ghostwriter, because like I was afraid to just start really, so I had a ghostwriter, and like even a month in with the ghostwriter, who I thought was kind of not even doing the best job, right? My stuff today is like much better. I still was like, I don't know exactly what this is doing for me, but like it's doing something. Like I want to keep pushing on this, So yeah, that's the long story short on the content. And like, it's kind of a crazy thing. Like the amount of desire you would have to just start, knowing that it's just going to be pure pain for probably like a year. Just very like I give speeches about this, right? Like it's like I had my first year, it took me a year for it to click. In the whole first year, I was struggling with what you're talking about. It's like, number one was like, I don't know why I'm writing what I'm writing. And that bothers me as a 12-year veteran entrepreneur, because I know why I'm making my product decisions. I know why I'm making they might be wrong, but I understand the theory behind why I am doing that stuff. Zero understanding of this social media thing for the first year. Fucking none, right? Like, didn't know why I was writing, didn't know why something did well, didn't know why it didn't, right? Now, I know exactly why something pops. Like, I know exactly who I'm writing it for. I know exactly the reason why I'm writing every single word on the page. So there's that discomfort, which like there's no answer to immediately. It just takes a long time. Then it's like the struggle you mentioned, which was like, well, I'm trying to attract e-commerce store owners, but I'm not one of them. Why are they going to read this stuff? Right. So like, to me, it was like, I was just like, well, I'm willing to work in public. So like, I'll just be really broad about entrepreneurship and we both hire people. That's fine. It's good. It's better than nothing. But like, it's not the acute pain that a revenue leader at a SaaS company felt in 2023, right? Like, which once I started talking about that, it was just in a way that no one else was even willing to admit to themselves, right? That was kind of the key. And then, once my content got better, it just like wasn't booking e-com demos, but it was doing all that other stuff that I was talking about. It was very easy to hire people. I would definitely walk around trade shows and get recognized. I was making videos every day. People were like, oh, I watch your videos. They're great or whatever. But it's just, it's nothing like this B2B thing.
That's great. The tempting question is to ask, because I've heard you say before, finding your voice, like the power of organic content, nothing can rival the power of posting organic content through the process of finding your voice. I've heard you say that a couple of times. And, the tempting question is to ask, well, how does one find their voice? But I think the difficult answer is kind of in the explanation of what you just gave. It takes the reps, it takes the iterations, and it takes the time.
But like so understanding how a person a public figure has always been created, I think is like one part of it. And then, so let me elaborate on that. There's, I had this girl, Jessica Zweig, on my Tuesday live show, and she is like a personal brand agency. She sold her agency to this company called Hawk Media, but like it was personal brand for tech people, basically. And her thing is like, it doesn't matter what platform you're on. What is necessary to create a personal brand is clarity, consistency, and constancy. The clarity part of it is everything that you say is a crystal clear articulation of this, reinforcing this idea of a person that you are trying to put in the minds of the world, right? So some people call that content pillars. Now, what makes that tricky is somebody like her and everybody else, they're just like, oh yeah, just write it down on my little worksheet and then start doing it. The problem is how it actually works is that idea gets co-created between you and what resonates with the audience, right? Because it does no good if, I want to talk about lima beans and nobody wants to hear me talk about fucking lima beans, right? Like they want to hear me talk about how the predictable revenue model is dead and how I buried myself in 2023 by trying to ramp a BDR team in like, right? So yeah, that's actually what takes a really long time. And like, once you've clearly defined that and so my buddy, Andy Muborn, who's also a big LinkedIn guy, he says this in a slightly different way. He's like, you don't post on LinkedIn to get followers and likes and pipeline. You post on LinkedIn to get a library of greatest hits. And your library of greatest hits gets you followers and likes and pipeline, right?
Yeah.
It's another way of saying like, once you get a banger, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, something about this worked, right? And then is that consistent with who I want to be, right? Like I bashed Sixth Sense on 4 posts. I don't want to be the Sixth Sense basher because the world would get, you know what I mean? It's like, that's not who I want to be, but like it worked, right? Like that wouldn't, so yeah, you can go like shit on everyone in the world and like probably get a lot of attention. That's probably not who you want to be, right? But like,
yeah,
there are things that you are an expert in and like whatever. And like, if I were you and I were trying to get SaaS people, I probably wouldn't try to talk about how the predictable revenue model is dead. I would probably be breaking down people who are doing really interesting shit with video and how it's positively affecting their brand in SaaS, right? Like in giving tips on like, okay, this probably cost this guy $12,000. Like, here's how you do it for like 100, right? Or something like that. Like that would be the angle that I would start experimenting with if I were you. It's like some blend between expert and audience or something like that. So yeah. And then once you have the clarity thing that evolves over time, then it's like, do not deviate from those themes, except experimentally to try to find more of them. But experimentally, I'm talking like 5%, right? And then constancy is just, you got to be everywhere with that message. And it's the same thing as like a politician. It's like anything you asked Trump during his first campaign, he would say, you're going to win with Trump, right? Like it's just the same. You just got to hammer this message into people's heads. When I noticed this about LinkedIn, I was driving home from Aspen alone because like my wife and the nanny took our baby in on the American Airlines flight or whatever. And I was just 15 hours, like, banged it out in one sitting. And I listened to Chris Walker for like 6 hours. He's this other LinkedIn guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, man, like this guy is saying, like, you listen to him once, you're like, fuck yeah. Like, it's just so definitive. And he's like, he's right. Yeah. Self-report attribution, multi-touch attribution, there sucks. It's fucking dog shit. Like, never get a booth at a trade show, whatever. And then, in hour 5, I'm like, holy cow, he is he has literally only talked about the same 5 things in these like 40 episodes I've listened to, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's wild. But like, that is what it is, right?
Yeah.
What this platform allows you to do is like find a resonance with an audience and then aggregate audience around ideas. So like, here's kind of what he does. He's got this loop where it's like, he's got his live event once a week. And the people that attend that live event are people that buy into what he's saying on LinkedIn. So they show up, then they ask him questions, which are obviously they agree with the ideas that he has, or they wouldn't be there. And that's his content. He literally just films himself answering the same shit over and over again.
Yep. Yep.
And then he posts it on LinkedIn and it like grows the audience of people. It's like, that's his, I do it very differently than that, but like, that's what he does. And it like really works. And I think it's like, somebody else should do that. You know, so I literally had a spreadsheet where I wrote down every single thing Chris Walker said in that 6 hours that I listened to him. And it was only like 5 different major categories. And then I wrote the equivalent of like things that I could say that were kind of like that.
Good.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an exercise that might be worth pursuing for everybody. I can give you a link to that spreadsheet in the show notes. I can give you a link to actually this presentation I gave at the Pavilion event that like talks about all of this stuff too. It's like a good read through. It's got QR code links to like 50 different posts where I talk through like why stuff didn't work or whatever.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've heard him reference that because he was talking about like in the beginning, there wasn't as much traction on his content. And I think it's almost the mentality of like, you know, call it what you will. Maybe it's the, the 4 steps to epiphany or like the lean startup. Like you're testing and ideating, but you're doing it with content, not just with your product. And I love this approach. And you know, you call that with what Chris's approach is. Like I've heard him say that he was trying to create themes just kind of based off of his assumption of what people wanted to hear. But then, you know, the method you just laid out, like those are actual questions. It's like ear to the floor. So if they're questions that he's fielding from people that are his ICP, they're like definitively going to be questions that other people have. So he's just kind of, it's validating the content like in real time. So I love that. And I've heard, you know, again, doing some research, right. And listening to, a ton of content, right? The past couple of days, especially. I love the idea. We've talked about it a little bit, and I think a lot of it's kind of similar to like a Greg Eisenberg approach of like, what is it? ACP funnel. So audience, community, product. Like you're creating, I think it's value oriented from the beginning. You're creating something that does inherently have value to someone else. So like the example that you shared with what I could do, it actually worked well, by the way, compared to the other content I've created. I did one like, you know, make a Hormozy style video with no, you know, production team. And it was a breakdown of how he got certain shots.
Dude, perfect. Yeah.
It's
exactly
like that.
Exactly what I would be doing. Right. Like,
and, you know, I did one with, it's, I have a dry sense of humor. But, you know, I went through and I looked at, you know, yourself, Greg Eisenberg, Cody Schneider. And, I was like, what is the secret that all these guys have in common? Well, obviously it's their flawless hair. Like, you know, that's the only reason they're all successful. And it's kind of like this tongue-in-cheek thing, because at the end, I'm like, and if you can't have flawless hair, just do what they also did and create video content that speaks to the audience. So it's like, again, too tongue-in-cheek, I think too dry humor. But the whole premise of it being like audience, community, product, like as Greg would kind of lay it out, or what you kind of presented, is that exponential value on being the face of the content, your own kind of disciple of what you're creating, because it doesn't just maybe net leads, like it doesn't just generate some potential leads, but it also creates, I think, what you've called is the only moat today. It's the only thing that you can have a foundation on that is potentially a moat. So yeah, speak on that a bit if you could.
Yeah. So like, you know, I think network effects can be a moat too in SaaS, but like most people don't have them. So it's like, you know, brand and community, like they have to be the only, because people can build stuff so fast now. AI is going to make it faster. Like, I don't know. So I think the best, look, Russell Brunson is the only SaaS entrepreneur that I've seen do this, like really founder led, grew a big business. He was selling to internet marketers. So like it wasn't B2B. So B2B people don't take him too seriously, but like his words, if you get into the position where your prospects are willing to pay you for advice, they will buy anything from you.
Good. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's not the product anymore. They're buying the advice. And like what he did in his go-to-market was he would do a one-to-many sale talking about how internet marketers could grow their business through funnels and like how they could throw all their other tech out. And it's just the funnel thing that does all the messaging and the website and the Stripe integration and everything. And then what he sold them was the ClickFunnels course, a course on like generating traffic, a year of ClickFunnels for free for $9.97, right? Like, and like it flew off the shelves because the presentation fired you up and you're like, dude, so like through his position in that ecosystem, which he was a teacher, he was one of the most respected and he was good at it. He was selling a path to a larger business, which is much more important to people than whatever pickaxe you're selling them, right?
Yeah.
So, so when explained that way, like I see how somebody would use ClickFunnels over lead pages or anything else, because it's like, dude, like Russell's the man. He like, because his stuff was actually that good. You know, he was so good at like instructing how to actually build the business that was his moat, right? And that it's easy to say the words brand is a moat. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, that's an articulation of how Russell's brand is a moat. Not everybody's going to look like that. I think mine can sort of look like that. Like I've recorded some courses. I think there's a unique opportunity with the build in public. It's like the beauty of LinkedIn is that you can go viral within a very tight ICP. The downside of that is that you only post stuff that will go viral inside of that ICP. So like, I think there's a very credible statement that can be made where it's like, you love the work in public stuff. That's great. You're only seeing the stuff that LinkedIn will go viral because that's all I can afford to post. If you want what's actually happening inside of every campaign that we run, that's like another part of this, coaching bundle. It's like we have the work in public channel. You can look at our ad account. You can look at our SEO plays. You can look at our, this, that, and the other. And, you can ask us questions about it, right? So like, I could see people being very interested in following along with that, right? And it's like, okay, if you're using that, are you really going to like use like Wormley's tool or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So yeah, creating, I think for me, it's like the world is set up. Everyone's living on these social media platforms. What they do is they create high status individuals through however, right? Instagram, it's envy, like TikTok, it's humor or something. And LinkedIn, it's thought leadership and, whatever. So if that's what's happening, it's elevating the status of people to whoever's looking at it. And then it's doing that, in a very, like it's scaling this human to human thing, like massively, creating like this tons of trust. It's like, why? Like it's just far more efficient than any other way of selling that could ever exist. It's why the Kardashians are billionaires. It's, why everyone knows who Alex Hormozy is, right? Like,
Exactly.
it is so, so powerful. So that's just how I think for startups in particular, brand has evolved. It's like, for me, like, I am the brand, like, and that's fine, but we have a sketchy product. Like I try to humanize everything because of that. Right. Like I don't want people to even think about how the product's sketchy because they trust me,
Yeah. It kind of affords you the runway too, I think, to iterate on it because you've built the trust with the community and
totally.
like, they're not expecting a flawless, like, I think to your point, like you mentioned a couple of the guys that I think are, yourself included, right? Like the poster child, like if you're to emulate someone's process, not their product, not steal their idea, but look at the trajectory of how someone started and to where they are in terms of content creation and brand building. I think, like you said, Russell Brunson, obviously, Hormozy, obviously yourself. But I think like what each of you have in common, like today, where we sit and observe what y'all created today, is you do have the proof. You've got the credibility because of what you've already done and what you've already built. And Hormozy talks about this all the time. He's like, I've got conviction into what I share because I've already done the thing. I don't have imposter syndrome because I've already done the thing that I'm speaking about. Like I've already proven it's legitimate in its efficacy by having done it. So, that being said, what would you say to someone who's maybe in the earlier stages? They haven't yet built the big, impressive thing. Maybe they're tinkering with it. They're still trying to find a little bit of traction, but they want to get started. I know you've said before too, like you've kind of paired it like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And in the same way, that's content creation. So again, someone kind of in those early phases where they don't have this big, impressive background yet, but they're trying to do both these things simultaneously.
I mean, everything is working against you when you're starting a startup for the first time. When you get to where I am, everything is working for you. Just have to keep that in mind. Yeah. Nothing was working for me when I started my first company 12 years ago. Not a single thing. I had never done it before. Did not know what I was doing. Zero brand recognition. Product sucked. Didn't have money, like the whole thing. Now, the opposite is true in every regard. So this is a Hormozy tweet that I love. Every successful person started with 0 revenue, 0 subscribers, 0 followers, 0 whatever, right? So I advocate for working in public as an early stage founder. Why? Again, no one gives a shit if you're launching it. Like, I will assure you, no one cares. People care when I build in public because I bootstrapped 25 million ARR. There's like 5 other people who have fucking done that, right? Like it is just so rare and no one's writing about it, right? So it's like, that's why I post one of those updates and it gets 800 likes on LinkedIn. The value of starting right out of the gates is twofold. 1, you're one day closer to finding your voice. 2, any excuse to get audience attention is so valuable that it's an easy way to start doing it, and just reporting. It's like a really easy way to try to get in the groove of doing this. Right. So, look, I said it early in the show. It's like, just based on what I write as my header, my words will probably be more valuable than almost anyone. There are other people's headers. If you look at something that Jeff Bezos wrote next to mine, you're not even going to think about reading mine, right? But like for my audience, it's like, you're right. It's like my perspective, my point of view, and the credibility of what I have accomplished makes my words incredibly valuable for a certain group of people. If you just stay at it long enough, you will be there too. Yeah, that is all I have to say.
Yeah.
Can you please get me to skip the incredibly hard journey that you went on to become a successful startup founder, and B, find content market fit? Sadly, I cannot.
Yeah. And that's what most people want, right?
Endured. Arnold Schwarzenegger actually said this. It's like, a lot of times people get handed like trust fund sums of like money, and it kind of ruins their life. And a lot of people who are self-made, it has not ruined their life, and like a lot of the reason is because becoming wealthy in a self-made way, like you learn a lot of lessons that you get taught along the way of becoming that successful, and like how the world works and how people work and how the whole thing. It's like, it sucks. It hurts in the beginning. It's super painful, but like those lessons are incredibly valuable,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you just got to start. Like of course it sucks, right? But like,
yeah,
you just got to keep going.
I love it. Because you've heard people refer to like using Russell Brunson as the example. Like, I think a lot of people try to posture without having the credibility And it, for one, you see right through it. And then two, like to your point, like if you're comparing side by side, why would anybody who hasn't created any success by any metrics in the software space, and then next to your post, why would anyone read theirs versus yours? But I think too many people kind of, they assume from a content perspective that that's what's required. But I like the other approach, and it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about building and the progression and the process.
Yeah.
And it's like the document, don't create approach, but it's also like you're
at the
learning these
beginning,
lessons
for sure.
along the way.
For sure.
And Russell talks about
Documenting
being
is
the reporter.
easier than having like really good takes.
Yeah.
You know.
And all you have to do is kind of be, a couple of steps ahead of the person that you're informing or creating content for. But I think to the point of like, there's a different perspective or a different lens, right? Maybe to use a camera reference, a different lens and how we curate it when it's maybe pairing kind of as the conduit, right? Or Russell Brunson would say like as the reporter, like that's the phase in your career or in whatever it is that you're building those skills, you're refining and you're growing in from a professional sense. But as a content creation, I think it still offers value to the audience because you are taking someone. Honestly, it's exactly what I'm doing with this podcast. Someone who's far more experienced like yourself, super well-versed in your space. You've got a ton of success. And I get the advantage of ignorance because I get to come in and ask dumb questions that I don't know the answers to. And then, anybody that's on the receiving end of this and hears it, they get to glean something from what you share. So it's like, as opposed to trying to stand here and posture to say like, trendy buzzword references to things that I know nothing about, just kind of this, instead of holding up a microphone to someone who's got that platform.
Yeah. I mean, that is also an approach. The tough thing is landing those people.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, but look, there's always an angle. And it's just my angle is different now than it would have been 5 years ago, and it would have been very different 5 years before that had I been doing it. But there's always an angle.
I love it. So to kind of land here, there's a couple of things I want to ask before we wrap. One of them is I've heard you reference a couple of times, and you just mentioned it, right? Like how things have kind of progressed and what you learned from your first business to the second business, and now kind of moving forward with RB2B. Like I think it was when someone asked, basically about I think it's early days of retention. If you were to do it over again, you said you wouldn't create that company, like you wouldn't do it that way at least. And I think you've mentioned before, like the way that you acquired clients in the early days wouldn't work today. So kind of with that lens, how things are changing, how things are evolving, tactics aren't working the same as they did 5, 6, 7 years ago. What does the future kind of look like in your assumption on anything from the phase you're in now, growing our B2B, or even kind of those early days, someone kind of in that early day startup?
Yeah. So like when we were thinking through what the go-to-market motion for RB2B was going to be, originally it's like, it's probably going to be a high churn product because of the nature of what it is. We're selling leads. It's high churn. Maybe we should go for a lower churn buyer persona and start with the mid-market and have a sales-led motion because I have a brand with these people and we can get them on the phone. Then there were 2 reasons I didn't like that idea. Reason number 1 was I just had this experience. I literally believe that like outbound sales is like, you can take someone to a Lakers game if your ACV allows that. That'll always work, right? Like, working trade shows or whatever, that'll always work. But like this sort of lean, put someone in a seat, have them sort of digitally, like, send emails and stuff. Like, I just think it's every year there will be more spam sent out and like more ratcheting down by spam filters than there was the prior year. Yeah. So yeah, like I was like, what business, what go-to-market motion will for sure be more of what it is today in 10 years? And for me, it's no doubt influencer-led founder, CEO, sales will be a much bigger thing. There'll be many more people spending more time on LinkedIn than there are today. Absolutely crushing that game will be bigger now than it is today, right? So like in that regard, that's future-proof. And then it's like, when no one answers, when the reply rate is 0 on communication, when you only get calls you want and you only get emails and texts that you want, how will you distribute something? And like free distributes itself. So like influencer led plus free was, in my opinion, something that is kind of like more powerful in 10 years than it is today. Whereas like a sales led, I would argue, will get harder every single year, you know? So yeah, look, that's how I think about, think about every situation is different. You know, that's how I thought about this. It's like, I'm creating a company from scratch. I've kind of cracked this like influencer thing, which I think we're in the early days of. Like, what's the future if you have that available to you? What's your future proof go-to-market motion? To me, it's no question. It's big freemium offers, influencer led, right? Like, and just try to get as much attention as possible on social media. Yeah, I mean, that's probably all I have to say about that.
No, I love it. Are y'all pairing that with like a UGC approach, or is it mostly just like scaling?
Yeah, but it's because we can. I mean, you can't, you know, before I figured out what our UGC motion was, I was like, oh yeah, we'll just like pay our users in some way to post about this. And like, no one will post good content. It's either going to be incredibly expensive, like too expensive, versus the impact you're going to get, or the dynamic that we have, which is so incredible, is this company called Clay put together this group of agencies, and it's actually better for them to post about our B2B in Clay for growing their agency than to post about anything else. So we don't have to do anything and they'll post. If we put them in contests with each other for visibility through like my profile or my newsletter or whatever, they'll fucking fight each other, to bludgeon each other to death about it, right? They'll try to put out the best post in the world. So like, not everyone has that available to them. You know, like Play has this brand heat, and the nature of their product is such that this workflow content is just exceptional, you know?
Yeah.
And then ours provides this new magic to it, which like opens up these crazy workflows. So like, you know, UGC's unbelievable, but like you really have to have the right alignment to be able to make it work with any kind of scale, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah. It has to make sense, and it has to be, yeah. I like that. Obviously, again, it's kind of one of those things where you mentioned it before, like the same power that your brand has and the same power that any content you post has, you know, now our B2B has that kind of in a very similar fashion paired with Clay, has that same leverage because y'all created something that pairs so nicely with their product. And so the last thing I would say, and this is, you know, to land the plane more from an ideation perspective, what would you say is something that doesn't yet exist from a software perspective, but should?
Man, I don't know. I should be better prepared for that one because like, I just don't. I mean, look, I mean, maybe what I'm doing, it's like an AE should have their own little, like getting served these signals in a very frictionless way, and then having their little AI assistant tell them exactly what to do. It's like, connect with this person on LinkedIn, send them this, and like write them an email that says that, and like, here's why I told you that, right? These 3 reasons. Like that is very near to what I'm doing, and it's just, to me, it's what makes what I do usable, and it's not out there yet. But yeah, I don't know, man. You caught me off guard with that one. I don't know what doesn't exist yet.
No, yeah. My thinking was that it would kind of lead into like, it's an open-ended way of asking kind of what you're working on, right? But yeah, it's exactly that, right?
That's certainly what I'm focused on.
Yeah, it makes sense. No, I love that. And again, kind of to echo the point, but like, it's moving away from like that high volume, low value, you know, at scale sales approach. And it's more like when someone's in your ecosystem and they bought into you and the brand you've created and the community that exists around you, like for all intents and purposes, they're customer for life. So like whatever leverage that builds and creates, like it makes sense that you're working toward that, not just as a content facing approach, but as a product as well.
Yeah.
No, Adam, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've learned a ton. Selfishly, I wanted to, obviously, you've been on many a podcast talking about the journey of what got you to where you are today. So I didn't want to ask the same exact questions that everyone else has asked because you've answered them ad nauseum. But I think you shared a ton of not just practical, but like immediately applicable advice for any startup founder, any entrepreneur for that matter. And I'm genuinely appreciative of your time and your knowledge that you shared. What's the best way? Obviously, we talked about LinkedIn, but what's the best place for someone to follow along with your journey?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn or send me an email at adam@retention.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Adam. It's been an absolute blast. I appreciate it.
Take care.